When we left off on the S4, we were waiting on backordered control arms. That's still the case, so this week we're going to spend some time tracking down an issue.
The S4 seems to have a bit of a battery drain as of late, so I'm going to do a little bit of diagnosis to see what the issue is. The car runs great when it's on, but I have to jump it pretty much every morning to get it to start unless I unplug the battery. I check the battery in the morning and the battery's holding a charge, so it's something in the system that's draining it. I have a few ideas, so I'm going to start by getting a multimeter in line with the battery, and then we're going to pull some fuses to see if that changes anything.
This is a multimeter, and you can pick one up at pretty much any hardware or electronics store. It looks complicated, but it does a simple task. It has the ability to measure pretty much anything you would ever need for any electronic system. Current, voltage, and resistance are the big three. Today, we are specifically going to care about current. Current flows through circuits like water flows through a pipe. So in order for the multimeter to read that current, what we need to do is put it effectively in that pipe. There are a number of ways you could do a current draw test. This is how I was taught to do it. I connected the multimeter between the negative terminal cable and the negative terminal on the battery. The knob on the multimeter tells you what you're reading, and it generally allows you to change your measurements precision so that you can capture small or large values. Mine is set to the tens place, so this is about 0.7 amps.
That is quite a bit more than it's supposed to be. That's almost an amp of draw, which is pretty bad.
For reference, the car is in its sleep cycle and no electronics are on. From what I found online, we're looking for about 50 milliamps or less of draw. This is multiples of that. Yikes.
The goal with pulling the fuses isn't necessarily to specifically find the issue, but we can find the system that the issue is actually in. So we know if the current draw goes down when we remove the fuse for something like the alarm or the door locks or the radio, then that system has the issue, so we can investigate that further. Really, this just helps me narrow it down.
Since we have a lot of fuses to pull, I'm going to be using a fuse puller. You can either go buy one of these or use the one that comes in your Audi TT. From the factory for some reason. Oh, and if you're wondering why I'm jumping straight to a current draw test, my alternator's less than a year old and the battery is about a month old. So unless I got duds, I'm thinking it's something else. You probably noticed earlier, but I set the multimeter so that I could read it from where I'm going to be when I pull the fuses. I'm looking for big changes here, trying to figure out which fuse causes it to go back to a normal amount of draw. There are loads of fuses, so this is a lot of repetition. It's really just a matter of being meticulous and testing every single one. Eventually, though, I found something.
Looks like the issue is in fuse 15. When we do that, it drops down to the order of milliamps as opposed to amps. So I think that's definitely a step in the right direction. Fuse 15's got a number of things that it controls. Namely, the two most important are the instrument panel, so this guy right here, and the air conditioning system, along with the power windows. Easiest one to test is going to be the instrument cluster. In theory, we can just unplug the instrument cluster to see if it's still draining, and then if not, we should be good to go. If it still is, then there's issues beyond that we're gonna have to figure out.
Once you've narrowed down what fuse it's related to, you generally just need to figure out what that fuse controls. If you look online, different people say this fuse controls different things, and they might be right. The fuse panel cover, however, says that this fuse controls the instrument panel and the air conditioning. So these are the first two things I'm really going to test. The instrument panel comes off quite easily, and then we can do the same test to see if, in theory, it was causing any of the draw. It's really a pretty large draw, so I'd be surprised if something like this caused the draw, but you never know. Unfortunately, once I got the instrument cluster unplugged, there was no real change in the current. So I don't think it's this, even though the LCD screen is a little glitchy. That might be causing some sort of a draw, but not the big issue we're dealing with.
Looks like that didn't change the draw, so I think we can safely eliminate the instrument cluster. I'll do some research after the video and double check that. Looks like the two options left are the AC system or the power windows. I know for a fact the windows in this car are wonky, so I think that's probably going to be the next place I go.
So why did I jump to Windows all of a sudden? Well, a combination of bad forum information and the psychology concept of perceptual bias. This is an example of how easy it is to get drawn into a red herring when it comes to diagnosing your car. I know this car's windows are a bit wonky, and online there is some information to support that Fuse 15 could control the window. Perceptual bias is the idea that your brain kind of sees what it wants to see to prove what you're thinking. I knew my windows had issues, and someone online mentioned that Fuse 15 interfered with his power windows. We don't know that for certain though, but at the time that made sense to me. In situations like that, I always like to take a step back and start with what we know for certain. The Fuse panel does not list windows. That might be true, but we need to check what's on the Fuse panel first.
The fans in this car have been behaving strangely for months now, and this has been like kind of a minor issue, so I haven't really brought it up on the channel, but I think it kind of makes sense, and if my hunch is right, then it really makes sense. So randomly, like in the middle of the night, the fans would come on, and not the radiator fan, like the air conditioning fan, and they'd come on like maximum speed when I wasn't even in the car. It happened in the middle of the night and I went out just because I heard it. I thought it was just a fan relay. Fast forward, that only happened when it got really cold or snowed, so I just thought it was, a quirk of it being -20, because this car, I haven't owned it since it's been that cold before. What if they are connected? What if the battery drain has something to do with those fans? Just so happens to be that fuse that is the issue, so I'm thinking I'm gonna look at the harness to that fan specifically. I have a hunch that might be our problem. Mechanically, the windows need a little love, but electrically, they should be fine. So I'm assuming it has to do with the air conditioning, and I bet that is related. What I want to do is get the car on ramps and see if that's actually our issue.
With all the mixed information online, diagnosing stuff like this can be a bit of a rabbit hole. It's easy to get sidetracked by things that might be red herrings, like me and the windows. My approach for stuff like this is to start with what you know to be true, and then move on to what might be true.
Looking closer, I think we may be onto something because I see something pretty concerning. If you look above, straight down at the engine bay, you'll notice that the harness is eerily close to the serpentine belt. You see that wire right there should not be under that pulley. It should be back there.
I really thought we were onto something here, but sadly, it's not chewed up enough that it would cause the issues we're having. Bummer it's not the issue, but I'm glad we caught it before it got worse.
Doing a little more thinking on what the issue could be, I still think it has something to do with the AC system. Out of all of those issues, that's kind of what I vaguely narrowed it down to in my head. I've not eliminated the other two, but I'm pretty sure it's not the instrument cluster because the drain didn't go down when we unplugged it, and I know for a fact that all the Windows electronics work just fine. It's just the mechanicals that need a little bit of work. I think I'm going to try to do the same test and pull the relay for the AC. And the climate control, and we'll see if that does anything.
These systems are overly complex, and honestly, trying to find an electrical issue in a car like this is like searching a labyrinth. There's just so many ways to go that sometimes you never know which way is the right way. In cases like this, I really just like to try and be meticulous, eliminating things one at a time, and I'm hoping by doing that, we'll eventually find something. While I was in here, I was feeling around for moisture. I know water and electronics don't usually like to mix, so if there was any sort of water damage in here, I'd want to know about it. The padding was damper than I expected, but I don't think I would describe it as wet. I'm assuming it just felt like that because it was cold outside. The relay I'm looking for is for the AC clutch, and it's number 267 right here. If a relay fails in a certain way, it can cause a constant draw, so it could definitely be part of our problem. I pulled it to give it a visual inspection and immediately noticed that both of the voltage leads on the relay looked quite charred. I compared this with a few other relays right next to it, and none of them looked this way but this one. It's a cheap enough part that I'm going to order a replacement either way.
I think I'm gonna take some time to do some more research. Maybe if you guys have ideas, let me know, and we'll pick this back up later when we actually have the parts to fix it too. We at least know which system it's a part of now, and we stopped another catastrophic wiring failure in the future. Since the car was dying every night, one thing I am gonna test just to confirm is I'm gonna keep that fuse unplugged tonight, and we'll come back in the morning to see if the battery died or not. In theory, if that is actually our issue, then having it unplugged, we should be totally fine and have a fresh battery tomorrow. It's the next day, so we're gonna see if the car starts up and if the battery didn't drain, and that will confirm at least the area that the issue's in. Yep, that'll do it. The battery did not drain, which confirms that that's where the draw is from.
So the car starting is good news and bad news. Good news is we properly narrowed down the issue and eliminated it by removing the fuse. Bad news is we need to find what is actually still causing that. It was supposed to rain this afternoon, so I was dealing with limited time today, but I wanted to check a few things just to check them off the list for peace of mind. I made sure the connections for each of the main grounds for the car looked good and that there was no water in the ECU box. The only thing weird or out of the ordinary was this set of wires that I found. I'm honestly not sure where these are from or what they're for. They've been like this since before the battery drain though.
It is starting to rain pretty bad, which makes diagnosing this a little bit more difficult. I have some ideas as to where I think it is coming from. If you guys have any ideas what it is, let me know. Progress is sometimes frustrating like this. Hopefully we'll get a nice weekend next weekend and can really start the suspension build, and we'll have an answer to what this is by then. That's the goal.
I'm honestly pretty bummed that we didn't find it right away, but fingers crossed that it actually ends up being that charred relay. I also read that it could be a poorly functioning door latch, and I know this car has a bad one, so I have one on the way anyways. I am happy, however, that we've narrowed it down to a single fuse, and pulling that whenever I park the car sure makes it a lot easier than undoing the battery every single time. But hopefully we'll fix this soon, and hopefully those back-ordered control arms will finally get here. I'm gonna reach out to them again this week because I have everything but just the front control arms to do the suspension, and I'd really like to get it on the car. This car is a little different than the TT in that the coilovers and control arms kind of come out at the same time, so it doesn't really make sense to do them separately, which is the main reason why I'm waiting. Either way, I've got loads planned for this car and the TT in the future, and I hope you're excited. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch my video. It means a lot to me. If you enjoyed it, learned something, or want to see more, consider dropping a like and subscribing. It's the best way you can help support me and my content. Either way, I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day.